I want a North London derby week, but we've got Mikel Merino missing, a suspension for Declan Rice, and Martin Odegaard has gone off injured. As to Calafiori, in fact, he's been sent back Italy camp. So we're going to spend the next hour chopping our way through all this news, some of the hysteria online, which I don't say that judgingly. I actually feel some of that to the point where I had to go live with a thumbnail that just said FFS because I was that frustrated about the Martin Odegaard news. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But also, I really liked Sheroy's video. I say like I've actually got around to watching it yet. I haven't, but I love the title. Big up Sheroy's voice. But the question about whether we're a bit too fragile as a fan base, I want to explore that a little bit more, why there's a long season to go. Joining us, very special guest. It is Gooner Lee, who we've worked with on AFTV, is not afraid to give his opinion and say it how it is. That's why I'm so excited to have him on the podcast, because we disagree on quite a lot of things. We agree on a lot of things. But what I love, I think social media and football, chat in general needs to go more in this direction. We can still just have a good chat and disagree and everything's great. And I'll give you a big hug at the end. It's absolutely fine. Lee, welcome.
Listen, man, I think firstly, honestly, I have to say I'm actually privileged to be, asked to be on this show, this channel. Sheroy, I'll definitely need to be on your show next as well. I think, the content that you guys put out, the way that you can articulate yourself, I think the way that you can rationalize things, honestly, it does get me thinking, it's brain provoking and, thought provoking. So yeah, definitely we're going to get into it, and hopefully we won't kill each other by the end of it, but I'm sure
we wouldn't have a chance against you. Have you been surprised at yourself, mate?
Do you know what? Everybody knows that I love everybody. I love James, I love everyone. But sometimes just got to kind of say it how it is, and hopefully it doesn't rub people up the wrong way. But yeah, honestly, it's all kind of love when it comes to Arsenal. We all want the same thing, which is to win. So yeah, that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. I think it's worth giving some context around what I only see from Twitter in terms of kind of your opinions on Arsenal at the moment. And stop me at any point, Lee, if I'm misrepresenting, because there's nothing I hate more than people trying to sort of tell me kind of what I think. And it's like, no, I didn't say that. But the reason I'm doing that rather than inviting you to kind of explain it is there's so much going on. But I think it's fair to say that you feel a little underwhelmed by the window and that you're kind of more worried about even Liverpool, let alone City. I think you've got them as your favourite to win the title. And you just feel like basically enough wasn't done. And actually seeing this Odegaard news, if I'm putting words in your mouth, is it a little bit of make your bed? Is that how you kind of feel about it?
I think for me, it's more along the lines of, I'm just really disappointed. I think, when I was younger, when I think about my parents, when I do something wrong, I wouldn't be reprimanded in, a heavy hand. My parents would be disappointed and actually feel worse. The disappointment of actually, they know that I can do better and I would do something that was just so silly. That guilt of disappointing my parents was the most heavy thing to hold and to have. And that's, I think, what's kind of molded me to try and always do the right thing. When I think of Arsenal, that's exactly how I think. I just feel that there's just pure disappointment. And it could be me feeling entitled, but I just feel that we should have done a little bit more this transfer window. And I think going into this window, it was quite obvious the things we needed. And I think when I look at what we've got, especially in the forward areas, for me, the way I just kind of really detail it, if Sterling didn't come out with the whole situation with Chelsea and the manager didn't sort of say that you're not playing, what would you have done? Because playing with the likes of Martinelli and Trossard, for all intents and purposes, they're just not the right players for those positions. Now, for me, look, sometimes I can be very harsh with some of my critiques and I can be very forward. Even you said it to me sometimes, James, and maybe I do need to pull back, but I will also say that it's just, I think people need to remember that I'm a fan, and with a fan, there's a time to support. There's always a time to support. You have to make sure that you back the club, but I'm emotional. That's what a fan is meant to be. I'm very, very, understanding of where my club is at and where I want to go to. So I think, we do sometimes have reckless thoughts and ideas about the club, and, we lose ourselves on stream as we do. That's all organic. And we also sometimes, say some things that at the moment, which, you would say it another way. And again, that's just the fandom. That's how you support the club. So yeah, look, like I'm not going to come on this show or any shows and kind of like say anything harsh about players, because at the end of the day, I love all the players, all of them, even the likes of El Neni. For different reasons, I love El Neni, but I also can say that he wasn't an Arsenal player anymore. So yeah, I think when I look at the club right now, I just think the mask is slipping a little bit with some of these owners and the transfer committee, and I don't want to have any excuses because we don't deserve it. And I think I'm going to end it on this point: is people always moan about Arsenal in the last 10 years spending money, but in our 130 plus year history, we've only had 10 years of spending money. We've only had 10 years. All those years ago, we've never spent money. In the 90s, in the early 2000s, way back. You go and look at all the transfers. It wasn't us. Everton was spending money more than us back in the day, in the 70s, in the 60s. Liverpool was spending more money than us. We've never had a period of dominance of spending money. Or Wenger, we don't need to talk about that. We already know what it is. You go and look at the last, I think it was from the late 90s to the early noughties. You go and look at all the transfers that we bought. None of them were in the top 20. None of them. If you even, extrapolate that into now's kind of money, none of them will go into the top 20 kind of signings. So we're within our rights to think that we should spend a bit more money now. 130 years, 10 years we spent money. Come on, just do a bit more.
There's a feeling the club could and should have done more in the window. I'm very aware that I did a live show yesterday. I've been off Forever Arsenal, so I don't want to kind of keep repeating my points. But I think to sum up for anyone who hasn't maybe seen me talking about it, I feel, as a sort of blanket rule, I feel that we had a fairly good window, but we definitely could have done a lot more. And I think City had a better one. That's kind of where I am. That I like the signings. I like Calafiori, I like Marino, I like Sterling for the context of the signing. But we definitely could have done more and left it out there. Sheroy, I'm sure you're itching to come in. I just want to ask Alicia one more question. Forgetting what could have happened, what could have been done, how do you feel about Calafiori, Marino, and Sterling, along with the outgoings? I mean, just forgetting the context of where we want to be, and actually, you can't really forget the context of where we want to be. But how do you feel about those signings?
Do you know, James, is honestly, it's so difficult because the most glaring position where I thought we needed, we didn't get. Well, we didn't get an adequate player, in my opinion. That's no knock on
the striker.
Sterling. Yeah, it's no. Well, a forward. Let me not say a striker, but I feel like an adequate forward. And it hurts me because obviously I'm going to have a little bit more bias towards Sterling because of he's Jamaican. I'm half Jamaican. I see and I feel what he does within the community of back home. It does mean a little bit more for me as a player to have him play for me for the club. But he's just not good enough for me, in my opinion. I don't think that he's the level that we require. Doesn't mean he's crap. Just don't think he's the level that we require for Arsenal currently. So, yeah, I'm gonna give it overall. If you had to talk about all the incomings and outgoings, just that, not thinking about what we physically really needed, give it a 5. I'll give it a 5.
Sure, let's go over to you now. Obviously, the reason I have this conversation is because of the backdrop of this Odegaard injury, Marino injured, Rice suspended. And by the way, I'm glad we didn't have a podcast after that because it had been 2 hours of ranting about Chris Kavanagh. But I guess my feeling going into this North London derby is I'm disappointed about the injury news. Of course, I'd want these players available, but I can't roll over and just be like, oh, here's what it is. Like, come on. Like, this is the 4th game. There's so much football to be played. And I am disappointed about previous things in the last few weeks. Of course. My match report, I said, yes, the Rice red card was a joke, but let's not pretend we were playing well up to the 55th minute. We weren't. People were Brighton didn't do much. Listen, we didn't until, Havertz and Saka pull out a moment. But there's so long of the season to go. I can't just roll over and die. Like, there's just so much football to be played, whatever the state we're in.
It's not just the online community, obviously, because I see this in my WhatsApp group too, right? But it might sound like a broken record, but after the transfer window closing and being slightly underwhelming, after the Rice red card and the knowledge that he was going to miss the North London derby, after dropping points at home, after the news of the Marino injury, and then after what we heard last night about Odegaard, it seemed as though there was no room for anything other than title's gone, you're delusional that you think we can win it, or you're a plastic fan, how can you lose faith immediately, right? And it seemed as though there's absolutely no room in the middle for, no, in fact, there is a lot of football to be played. And not only do I think that we can perhaps still challenge, but we have a huge game this weekend that we can win, but I also completely concede that if you are a team that's on the cusp of something and you're met with these unfortunate injuries, those are things that are beyond your control, but you could have done a lot more with the stuff that was within your control to ensure that you were better equipped in these situations, right? And that's why I've refrained from engaging in much debate about it since then. And I've actually refrained from watching a lot of content because every time I open X, I sort of regurgitate a bit and close it. Where I am with this right now, I completely agree that if we're looking at the current state of the squad and the games that are in the immediacy, when you put that in the macro picture of the season, it looks troubling. I completely get that. But towards the back end of last season, the messages that were coming out of the fan base were, stop talking about what's 3 or 4 games ahead. It's one game at a time to win a Premier League title. All right. Why is that not the same sort of yardstick that we use now? Why can we not operate on a one game at a time basis now? Because, one, if you've lost, even if it's a flagship player, if you've lost 1, perhaps 2, and you feel as though you simply cannot challenge or cannot win a game against a team that finished outside of the top 4 last year, with respect, that squad, if that's true, was never equipped to challenge for a title. Okay, you have to be able to deal with that. And 2, yeah, Rice is out for Tottenham, but he's back for Atalanta and he's back for City, at which point we will have what I think is pretty much a first 11, bar an untested midfield signing that we haven't seen yet, and also our integral captain. But that's one major player that will be missing. And we're sort of sat there hitting ourselves about the prospect of these games. Lest we forget that when we beat Manchester City for the first time in God knows how long last year, Bukayo Saka was injured. And there was no hint of, right, we've lost our main guy. We absolutely can't win, right? So I think what I think I'm seeing, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, I don't speak for the entire fan base, but what I think I'm seeing is people were somewhat frustrated at the fact that the transfer window wasn't what we thought it ought to be, and ultimately wasn't what it looked like it was going to be with the mass outgoings. James, you'll remember that I messaged you and said, all right, Vieira's going now too. Something has to be coming. Something big has to be coming because we are clearing the decks, and it didn't. And we made the pragmatic signing instead. That has now been compounded by what's happened afterwards. And I think a lot of people that were harboring sort of ill feeling towards the transfer window and may have kept it under wraps through fear of being called a negative fan or through fear of being called fragile or whatever it might be. What has happened since has sort of opened the door, and then it's opened the floodgates to real hyperbole and real venom and real sort of, for want of a better word, defeatism in many ways. All right. So that's where I think we are in terms of the general discourse that I'm seeing. When it comes to Tottenham, anyone feel free to jump in here. But I saw them against Leicester. I saw them against Everton, and there's no utility in using Everton as a metric. And I saw them against Newcastle. I think we're firmly equipped to beat that team in their own backyard without Declan Rice and without Martin Odegaard. And we'll come on to the lineups in a minute, and I'm sure we will deal with that. But I see no reason as to why we can't turn up very similarly to the way that we did last year and say, all right, you think you're that good with the ball? We're brilliant defenders. Let's go. And just hit them when those inevitable spaces open up.
Go on, Lee.
Sheroy, can I just ask, in terms of what you think for this season, do you think Arsenal will win the league? If I had to kind of like push you for an answer. I'm
going to be dead serious here. Dead serious. I said on this show that Arsenal will win the league. Ultimately, at the start of the podcast, which was what, maybe 9 weeks ago, something along those lines.
Yeah.
I am far less confident now than I was at the end of last season, than I was at the beginning of the transfer window, and than I was at the end of the transfer window. And that,
so currently, do you still think we'll win it, or do you think another team will win it? Because it will kind of go on to my next question.
Yeah, look, I don't want to go into the will versus can thing. But one of the things that I was raising issue with was the notion that people think we cannot do it this season, as opposed to will not. Right now, if you had to ask me, people might call me a flip flop, but now, absent something unexpected, I can't look past Manchester City again, because some of that hope and some of that optimism that I placed on a transfer window that I thought was going to have a higher sort of magnitude and level than it did has depleted a little bit. But that is by no means me saying that I don't think we can do it, which is a lot of what I'm hearing and reading now. A lot of parents saying that we now simply cannot. I don't understand how you can reach that conclusion just yet.
No, I don't, and you're right. I think there's a sense of realism to say, do you know what? Like, there's just a juggernaut in front of us, and we aren't prepared. And look, everybody, I'm sure, knows that I'm a school teacher. I work in a secondary school, and I've got a form class. My form class are in year 10, and when they have their mocks that come up, obviously I have to have a little bit more grace when I say it. But I always say to them, you don't need to be nervous when you do your mocks. When you're in year 11, we do GCSEs. For people that are watching you from a different country, year 11, they do their GCSEs, which are their final exams before they go into the next sort of stage of their education, which would be 16, 17, 18. And I say, you don't need to be nervous. If you're nervous, you just haven't revised enough. Obviously, there's a little bit of nervousness in the whole eventuality of doing the exam. But ultimately, if you're not prepared because you're not revised for that exam, that's the reason why you're nervous, because you feel like, you know what, I'm going to try and wing it. And that's what I feel with Arsenal. They aren't prepared. And that's why the nervousness is there, because we've ultimately left ourselves uncooked, unprepared for the season. And that's now why there's a lot of, fear that we are going to fail and not do what we need to do, which then leads on to a whole bunch of stuff like this week. Fearmongering, fine, maybe, but Saliba being maybe linked to Real Madrid, because if we don't get the big boy prizes, they eventually are going to think, well, do you know what? I've been putting in all this effort and the club aren't showing me something back, or I've been putting all this effort in and we aren't eventually getting to the promised land. And you can't just, go off a hope and a prayer that these players are so in love with and so infatuated with Arsenal that they're just going to stay, because that's just not how life works. That's not how football works. That's not reality. So I think that's my point. Like, we had an opportunity. You saw the quotes on the last day of the season from Arteta, and what did he say? We're not happy with what we did finishing second. And listen, seasons aren't linear. I'm not saying that we are definitely should have definitely won the league this season because of how well we've done for the last two seasons. I understand that, but it's so annoying when you are so close and you are not doing it. When we were crap, finishing 8th, Arsenal don't spend the money. Fine, start again and build up. Because why? I can understand that I don't need to invest in something that currently isn't going to get you anywhere. But when you're at that point, push on a little bit, get that extra player, get that bit of magic stardust. And again, I just keep it. I think it's always going to come down to that one point. We haven't done enough, but hence why I feel like there's a lot of annoyance in the fan base, and why a lot of fans think, straight away, we're not going to do it, because we haven't done it when we had our best situations in the last 2 seasons. So that's why.
Yeah, and I also find a bit like what Sheroy was saying in terms of football discourse, right? It's okay to be somewhere in the middle, which is, I'm kind of shitting it, but I think we might be okay, but I'm not sure, and it doesn't look good. I'd much rather we had Odegaard and Rice. Like, it's okay to feel all these things. Like I said, I went live. I'm not trying to sit here and sort of, preach the everything's fine, people. Everything's fine. It's not fine. We probably have our best midfield 3 missing for the North London derby. That's not great. And we don't know what shape we're going to be in for Man City, and that is big. And we could find ourselves in a really sticky situation. We could also be really inspired by this, and I'll get on to all that. That's why I want to sort of try and generate some positivity through all this as well. But the one thing I do find is that there's not enough for me just sitting back and going, I don't know. And as fans, it's okay for us to not know, but we don't always want to say it. We, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be with a camera in front of us, we want to plant our flag in and have an opinion. And I think almost viewers prefer that. They don't sit on the fence. you're such a flip-flop. Just pick one. I said, well, but I don't know. And I'll explain exactly what I mean by this. And I'm building on a point I made on Forever Arsenal. So again, apologies for the repetition, but Vieira and Smith Rowe have gone. Is that a good or bad decision? I don't know. Now, what is going to answer that for me? How good's Ethan Nwaneri? Like, that for me is going to be a huge part of it. If Nwaneri comes in and balls out, and I know what people, but he's 17, how can you rely on? I hear all that. Now, the likely scenario is he's not ready, and we put too much pressure on him, and we banked on Odegaard staying fit because his fitness record's been great for us, and we've maybe got this wrong. That's the likely situation. But what if he's not? Like, what if he's not too young and not ready yet? And actually he is. And he comes in and he's brilliant. And the reason Vieira and Smith Rowe went is because Arteta's watched this guy for the last year and a half, given him minutes in central midfield in pre-season, and he's a gem, right? Like Lamine Yamal at 16-year-old. And he might not be Lamine Yamal. That's a lot of pressure, I know. But what if? And what if Partey rediscovers the form of 22-23, not 23-24. We had those injury problems. And Jorginho, you get another year out of him like that. And what if Raheem Sterling comes in with a point to prove? And guess what? The coach that unlocked his best form, and that is widely credited by Pep Guardiola, what if that coach gets that out of Sterling again? Suddenly you've got a player that might have cost you 50, 60 million with the form he might deliver. Now, I know everyone's going, oh my God, James, what have you been smoking for? I know. But what I'm trying to say is the reason I can't tell you whether I feel really optimistic or really devastated about Arsenal's chances. It's because I don't know what Nwaneri are going to get. I don't know what Sterling we're going to get. I don't know what Timber and Calafiori are going to add to this team. I don't know if Marino is going to fix the midfield balance of last season, whether Martinelli is going to rediscover the form of a year ago in the run-in, or whether he's going to be the player of the last 12 months. I don't know these things. No. But if these things land on the right side, we've got a bloody good team, people.
100%.
And I feel good.
I mean, just on that, right? A lot of, I keep drawing this comparison, but a lot of what we said in the January window last year when we hit that poorish run of form and people thought the title was gone then, right? People were like, no, we're in a top 4 race now. If we're operating with Kai Havertz and Eddie Nketiah as the front two, very suddenly we took it to the last day without the signing. And what happened is we have all this discussion about boys becoming men and people having to learn year on year and month on month. And this is one phase, but then there's another phase and it's progress. Well, okay, fine. And with respect, this is exactly where these players and this manager and this coaching staff need to earn their keep. Because, again, with the what ifs, right? By the way, if you open X now, I think Ethan was playing for the England youth. There are tweets that are saying he is elite. Definitively. And that's based upon one move with a bit of trickery with a shot that's ultimately saved, right? So there's absolutely no room for anything other than you're on crack or he's elite. But yeah, what about Martinelli? What about Martinelli maybe getting 15 goals this season? What about Jesus perhaps staying fit and chipping in with more than he did? What about Havertz, who's already on 2 goals, starting 35 goals up front for us, 35 games up front for us, and maybe getting 20. What about Bukayo Saka, who we're all trying to get into the world-class bracket, and some people think he's already there? What about him not necessarily getting Salah's numbers? We're getting closer to Salah's numbers. So he puts himself quite firmly in the world-class bracket as opposed to the guy that's on the cusp. You know what? I mean, there are so many of these things that are perfectly plausible. I don't understand how people can say, that's just not going to happen. We had to buy externally. These are things that probably should happen. The coach is becoming more experienced, and 11 that's becoming more settled. And these are all things that could edge us closer. One of the reasons that we're so hard on ourselves is because Manchester City are in our heads rent-free. You can't draw a game anymore, even in game week 3, without worrying about whether the title's gone. You can't even have a striker who scores 2 in 3 because they've got a striker that scores 2 hat-tricks in 2, right? And that ultimately, this is the issue. And that's why we're such self-critics now, to the extent that we come down so hard on ourselves. And God, I really hope, and I don't think they are, but I really hope the team and the manager aren't looking at things the way that we're looking at things. You know, with those amounts of nerves, they quite literally need to be looking at this by going, we probably should have won. We went down to 10 men. We dropped points against Brighton. These are 2 games. A lot of people are saying we take 2 draws. Bollocks. We need 6 points and we're going to do our best to go and get them. That has to be the attitude. And I think it will be.
But with Ethan though, like for me, I want him to succeed. I think he's an absolutely superb, amazing player. But if he was this player that everybody thought he was right now, then I'm sure he would have had some minutes in previous games. He hasn't had any minutes in the Premier League. Now, yes, preseason is preseason, but there are loads of players that look amazing in preseason for other teams, and when it comes to the Premier League, the lights come on bright on them and they don't actually perform. So I think for me, as well as this guy looks and how, as well assured as he looks currently at 17 years old, I'm also thinking to myself, we're putting so much pressure on this guy, and it can either make diamonds or burst pipes. So I don't want to come across negative or pessimistic here, but I'm also just saying, if he was as good as everybody's making out, then we would have seen him in at least one game. Now, okay, fine. Okay, I'll remove the Brighton game because different circumstances, but that's the first thing. The other thing is we need to make sure if he has a poor game, hold him accountable. If we are now putting this guy on a pedestal and say
there I disagree. Honestly, there I disagree, and I'll tell you why. Relying upon Ethan in this situation is irresponsible and unfair. Playing him in this situation is not. They're two different things. And I said this at the outset of the season. If you want Ethan on the bench, if you want Lewis Skelly on the bench, if you want to bring through youth, fine. They can occupy a space on the bench, and if needs must, they can play. But they shouldn't be the people that are bearing the weight of not succeeding this season. That should fall on those around them. And
no, I was just saying in performances, if he balls out and scores a goal, everybody's going to say how amazing he is. But if he doesn't play well, he's only 17 years old. No. We can't talk up both sides of our mouth. We have to judge him accordingly to the first team player that he is now. So I'm saying we can't not say that he had a poor game and he's not ready. All of it, because we know what there's a lot of mollycoddling to make out that because he's 17 that he needs to get more time. But if he does play well, then it's going to be a whole different conversation. And for me, if he's ready and he's a player that Arsenal and Arteta trust, and we're all backing him, and he has a poor game, then I'm not saying he's finished, he's washed, of course not, because he's 17 years old, but I'm also going to judge him accordingly as a first team player, because there isn't any one side and the other side. I don't think that should be.
I actually think that's fair. I actually think that's fair. Once you put on that first team shirt and you're going out to play for the first team, and you're playing a North London derby, like the expectations don't drop because you're 17. Yeah. But then what happens is, if he struggles, my questions go to Arteta, and they do. And my question is, why did you not recognise?
This is what I was saying. There's a lot of pressure on this guy, and I think that's why we come back to, I think when I was speaking earlier, why I'm so upset and annoyed with some of the, the transfer committee and Arteta, is because you're putting so much pressure on a 17-year-old. And look, Lamine Yamal has warped all of our minds. What he's doing is ridiculous. Thinking that today, when I went to work, there's a kid who literally left school last year, when I see 202 year 11s in my school every single day, thinking that he left school last year, and there's sixth formers. I taught year 12 today, A-level PE, thinking about those kids, and he's now playing in Camp Nou. This is crazy to me. So let's not make out that this is a normal thing, what Lamine Yamal's doing.
Sure.
I think we have to just be very careful when we say that this guy looks to be amazing and he's ready, but also hold the club accountable, because I think they're throwing him into the deep end, unfortunately, and let's see again if he comes up fighting or not.
Yeah, and you know what it is, right? I think the reason I feel probably this week more than ever, almost like I feel supercharged, like, no, I'm not allowing the negativity. And it's not because I don't agree. Like, Lee, there's very little you said that I don't feel as well in a lot of ways. And there is a fear and like is Ethan, are we really going to do this to him? Are we going to put him in this position? And, Eze was there. Why didn't we get Eze? I've done loads of videos on Eze. Well, we should have gone and got him and all these different things. But I have to say this comes on to the point I think you were raising in your video, Sheroy. Like I said, I haven't seen it yet. I'm so sorry, but everyone go subscribe to Sheroy's Voice. And your channel as well, Gooner Lee. But I feel this week, it's North London derby week. Yeah. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't want them looking at us going, they haven't got their house in order. This is like the week where we go, I don't give a we get our shit together and we are going to turn up because it's North London Derby week. I don't care if we turn up with the kids. Like, we are showing up to put in a performance and make the club proud. And I feel this sense of like, okay, the Erdogan news just happened and it's really annoying and we could have done more, whatever. But like, I feel this sense of like, come on, let's rally. This is the Derby. This is Tottenham. And whoever's going out there, Partey's played in bigger games in this. Jorginho's played in bigger games in this. So maybe Waneri hasn't. But when I've looked at him, and I've met the guy in person, he's walked past me. That guy he doesn't look 17. Right, he's confident. I've watched him play live in the flesh, and I've seen him in front of me, and I've shaken his hand. He looks a guy, from the very little I know of him, that he would relish this occasion. And if it's not him, then shithouse it with Havertz in midfield, or Trossard, or something. But we have got quality to hurt Tottenham, and I just feel like, yes, there's outside noise. I totally hear. But this week, I almost don't want any of it. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, let's go there with our however many thousand we can bring, you know, make a load of noise and just show them what we're about. I feel like that's Derby spirit.
What better game?
I feel like the fan base, we're lacking that a little bit right now.
What better game is there? I was having this conversation with a friend earlier today, and I said, you know what? With this cloud that's currently over large sections of the fan base, I actually don't think there's a better game to alleviate a lot of that, because when you're, regardless of the form that Tottenham are in, regardless of the form that Arsenal are in, regardless of what's on the line, you win that game in their backyard and it's euphoria. And very often you forget all the other shit because you feel so great. And that's exactly what you want going into an away Champions League trip and then the Etihad. And the what better game rationale is also, in line with what Lee's saying, equally applicable to someone like Ethan. It's okay. You were looking at Manchester City, but you signed with us, okay? The big clubs are all hovering around you. You played a hard bargain there, mate, and we gave you the contract that you thought you deserved. Our skipper's out. You're doing sort of, what's it called? I think they did a video together called Passing Notes or whatever it was, with Ødegaard and Ethan next to him, discussing, you know, succession and so forth. I mean, if that wasn't a hint that we weren't going to get an Ødegaard replacement in the window, I don't know what was. With Arteta mentioning the academy in every press conference that he gave, I mean, we should have all seen this coming, really. But what better game to make sure that people remember your name? What better game to announce yourself? You were both definitely watching when this unknown player called Marcus Rashford came along and banged in 2 against us on his debut, right? You know, there are certain games that can make or break careers. This could be one of them for him. And my only thing is, you put him in, I don't expect him to do what Ødegaard does, in the same way that I didn't expect Vieira or Smith Rowe to, because they're not as good. Right, and I don't expect him to be the reason that we win the game, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I think he should look like a fish out of water either. If he looked perfectly comfortable in that game, and those around him do what they're meant to do, that's a success for that game.
And this is where I'm being so glass half full, but this is where I flip it at someone who's the completely different end of his career to Raheem Sterling. What better club than the club managed by the coach you had your most success with? And I know people will go, who's played for Pep Guardiola? Listen to what Pep has said. Like, Arteta worked with Raheem. Like, so much of his good work came from the relationship and the coaching he got from Mikel Arteta. You're back with him in London at a rival of the club that just went, we don't want you anymore. You're not the kind of winger we want. You're 29 years old. You're not, let's be real, he's not loved by Liverpool fans. He's not loved by City fans. He's certainly not loved by Chelsea fans. But this is someone who is not, and I won't have it, he's not been a failure in the Premier League. He's had as good a career as any youngster or star player, what are they called?
Golden child, like Wonder Kid either.
Wonder Kid, right. Like, in terms of Wonder Kids and expectations, what has he not done? He's, you know, maybe the Champions League win, but he's been in multiple title challenges, played for the biggest clubs. He's won trophies galore, scored a load of goals. And guess what? He's done it for England, which a lot of people can't really say, no matter how talented they are. Even the very best didn't always do it. So he's coming to a club now where this is where he might be loved. Not even where he's done his best work, but he might be loved for coming in and being a difference maker, having a massive opportunity. And I just keep thinking to myself, what's done is done. That doesn't mean I don't have my criticisms about it, major criticisms about it. But Ethan, Raheem, 2 completely different ends of the story. But let's have at it.
Are you starting them both?
I don't think I'm starting either. For everything I've just said.
Okay, all right.
But the wider point of the season is where I think they can have big success. And I know I might sound very like, Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not fucking leaving. Like I know I sound like, but I
You
just
get the theme tune.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to inject some energy into this week, man. Like, come on.
You know what, as well? I think you're both right. I think you are both right. It is North London derby, but do you know what? Like, I don't think we should harp on about the negativity. But it almost feels a bit like I'm going out with this girl, and we're both having struggles. We're both arguing. I've been through her phone, and I've seen her messaging someone. I haven't messaged any. I haven't seen any of that stuff, so it's fine. But I feel like we're heading in a we're colliding into some sort of negative place where we know it's going to end. But we've gone to a wedding and we've had the best night ever. And right now it just feels like we're in that wedding and we're trying to hype ourselves up. But we know what's coming. We know that end is coming. And I think with Spurs coming up, with Atalanta and with Man City, I feel like we know what's going to come.
I want to enjoy the season. Maybe this is what, if I put my Turkish hat on now, right? This is all copium, and I'm talking about what might be needed to beat Tottenham. But deep down in my heart of hearts, I don't think we're going to win the league, and I've said as much here. So what's the point, right? That is that, and without putting words in his mouth, right? That ultimately is where he seems to be right now. I heard him last night say the league's gone, right? And maybe one of the reasons why I can't say that and don't want to say that is because I want to enjoy the season and I want to go on another journey and I want to have that hope. Otherwise, there's no point in me watching any of these games either.
I think that's a big point for me. What I think will ultimately happen doesn't change that I want to enjoy it with the hope that something more can happen. And I know, and you brought up Turks there, I did forever Arsenal with. I know, I don't know if he's going to the Tottenham game. Actually, I think he might be running a watch on Big Six. So go all subscribe and check that out. But I know, man, he'll be feeling every kick of a ball. And when that whistle goes, it's
100%
Arsenal. And it's like, and this is the energy that I kind of want to just try and to use an Arteta and transmit a little bit. I think if we were playing, with all due respect to Bournemouth, very good stuff, we were playing Bournemouth at home, I'd almost maybe be letting this get to me a little bit more and dissecting it, whatever. But I just feel like this is not the week for it. It's too big. But I totally understand everyone's concerns. So, I mean, on that, it is fair to say that we know everything's not perfect and more could have been done, but we want to try and carry the positivity into the derby or what we can muster. But how do we feel in terms of how this game goes? I think the two big things I want to explore in this last sort of 20 minutes or so is what would we do line-up wise and what do we want to see from Arteta tactically? But also, how big is this game? How important is it we win? I've got an unpopular opinion, which we'll get to. But let's start on that point. Sheroy, is it a must-win?
Yeah, I mean, for me, having dropped points at home to Brighton. Look, it's. I want 4 points from the next two games. And I think 4 points from the next two games, for me, not speaking for anyone else, for me is what would be required for me to say we're still quite comfortably in the title race. There is no title race yet. I understand that it's very early. But that for me is where I'd still be at an equivalent level of hope as I think I ought to be, right? So if we draw here, then I think the Etihad becomes the must-win. Now, call me defeatist. If we win here, I'd be more than happy with a draw at the Etihad. There'll be a lot of people that hate me saying that, but 4 points from those two games, you get your players back, you live to fight another day, you get the F out of there and you carry on. It's a long season. That's the attitude I have here. I think if we drop points in both of these games, more specifically the City game, I mean, that is ultimately a 6-pointer. That could be catastrophic, not just for the belief of the fan base, but also the Premier League table then does start to look quite daunting, because one thing you don't want to do with Manchester City is give them a lead, because we all know what they're like in the second half of the season. That's just me being perfectly honest. I think we need 4 points. I think we need to win against Tottenham, and I still think we will win against Tottenham.
Yeah. Go on, Lee.
Yeah, I think my first point is for all the worries that I have about Ethan, I also think that could be a positive. Like, this is the week that he can make his name in folklore. This is the week where he can actually come out and show who he is, and he can be kind of like an ace card up your sleeve, because no one knows about him and there's not much game tape on him. So the opposition. They won't know how to kind of defend against him. Really, what he likes to do in terms of the preferential side that he likes to play, what foot he is, etc. I know in that under-19s team, Mikey Moore, who's also a Spurs player, he could have a bit of information that he could pass on. But if we see him in gameplay, there's not much on him. But so I maybe I'm contradicting myself, but I am excited. I love Hayland. I literally lived across the road from Hayland when I was growing up. I lived in Walthamstow, and I used to see all the drive past with my mum all the time. So it was great to see it, and that kind of has a great affiliation towards me as well. So yeah, for sure that I want him to do well. Obviously, just fears about this such a huge game, and Spurs will be up for it. But yeah, I think I'm the same with Sheroy. I think when people keep going on with this nonsense about this utter woke nonsense about we must go to the Etihad and win, I'm just like, what the hell? I think Man City have only won one game against Liverpool away from home, one, and that was when they had like a load of players out. They had the one season, I know, when Mahrez missed a penalty in the first minute. Yeah, and that was with no fans as well. So for me, I just think to myself, why is the needle moved with Arsenal now that we must go to these?
Such a nonsense narrative.
Yeah, it's nonsense.
I'll argue with any ex-pro footballer who's going to try and gaslight me, thinking that we have to do something like no other champions ever do to win it. I get it. If we win, obviously we're in a better position. Yeah. Of course we are, but City lost. They lost at the Emirates.
Yeah. But I do think there is a cult building with Arsenal that they must go and win and put a marker down. I think that's nonsense. Obviously, for me, as I said, I said before the season started that I think Liverpool will win it. And listen, they may not win it, but they're sure doing a damn good job of performing well. Nobody had them. People had them in 5th place. So people might think I'm crazy for that, but right now they're doing all right. But when I look at Man City, I do think that we cannot lose. We just can't lose against Man City because every single season, it almost comes down to the fact that they've taken points off of us. And I think that's the issue.
Last season, I don't think they scored against us last season. And they still won.
But again, if I do the same way, I would say again, seasons aren't linear, man.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I just can't keep thinking about last season. Last season was last season. We put up a great defensive performance. We had the possibility of scoring in the last minute. We Trossard when he was across it, he didn't. And we go on to pastures new. We're here right now, and I think Man City look like they are ready to hand out some whoopings to certain teams. And I actually think
they look good.
Arsenal are one of those teams that they're looking at to kind of come and really put a marker down. Obviously, with Rodri coming back, with Foden possibly coming back into their sort of juggernaut of rotation of players. It doesn't look good. But listen, if anyone can go there, we can go there with our defense and defenders. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of work, but we can do it. So I agree 100% with Sheroy. I think we must beat Spurs. I think it's a given because of the Brighton situation. It's genuinely a given. And then, we move to Man City. And do you know what? I feel like I'm going to say something that people are not going to like. If we lose, I'm not going to go crazy. I'm really not, because it will only be 5 points. Now, yes, it's Man City. But as you boys have said, there are, 34 games left? 30, is it 34 or 33?
It'll be 34.
34 games left. I'm not going to, if we lose, when we play Man City, I think it'll be 33 then. So I'm not going to lose my head. Yeah, I'm not going to lose my head because it's 5 points and anything can happen. In December, everybody said the title was over last season. We went to Dubai and then people need to remember, we were second and then we could have gone first if we had beat Aston Villa, because obviously Liverpool lost to Crystal Palace. So listen, things can happen. It just doesn't look great. But I'm not going to lose my head if we lose to Man City, honestly.
So, and it's so important that people the way I'm wording this is very important. If I were offered a draw right now against Tottenham, I'm not taking it. It's the derby. I wouldn't shake hands on a point and walk away. But I do think this idea, we throw out it's a must win. We throw that out so often. What does that mean? For me, it's, you have to win this game. If you don't, all hopes are gone. If Arsenal might not like this. I'm not saying I'd take it now if offered it. But if we draw at Tottenham and we draw at City, and I know that there's Liverpool ticking in the background and they might be off doing their thing, but let's focus on City. If we draw at Tottenham and we draw at City, we're max 4 points behind them. Now, a lot of people go 4 points behind them after 5 games. Like, we're out of the race already. It's already too much. Almost like that gap's only going to grow. I'd be thinking of it as, well, we've missed key players. We had a ridiculous red card that cost us 2 points. I think that's fair to say, despite us not playing well. Mm-hmm. We've been to Villa Park, Tottenham, and the Etihad. I think you'd put those as your 3 of the 4 hardest away games, because I think Anfield's the other that make the top 4. And we're only 4 points behind. Now, again, I'm not saying I'd take that, but what I'm saying is this idea, it's a must win, it's a must win, it's a must win. That, for me, I'm not there, because I still think undefeated with those 3 games out the way, okay, it's 2 wins in 5, that's not great, but undefeated with those away games done, only 4 points behind City, I can't see that as some like catastrophic end to our title campaign.
I think a lot of people are calling it a must win because deep down in their hearts and in the back of their mind, they think the ultimate likelihood is that we're going to lose at the Etihad.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly my point. Now, so that was the thing I was going to come to. What makes this a must win, and where the argument is, City looks so good that it's like, no, we have to, because we're worried about what's coming next week. I am more confident we can get a draw at the Etihad than I actually am we can get a win at Tottenham. Does that make sense?
No way. No.
Can I tell you why? Can I tell you why?
No way.
I can see us housing a draw over there.
No way. No.
You're not?
No way. You know what? I just sorry to interrupt, Sheroy.
No, go on.
I'm not going to lie to you, bro. I'll take the 2 draws. Right now, if you offered it to me, you wouldn't even need to. Literally, I'm taking it. I don't care about that game. I don't care about, like what people think about me. I don't care if people think I'm bottling it. Me, I'm taking 2 draws and I'm licking my wounds and I'm going off. I know we'll possibly be 8 points behind Liverpool, but I trust that Liverpool.
No, we could only be 6.
I would.
So we're 2 behind.
Okay, yeah. And then we have. I know we have October the 27th because I'm going to the game. We have Liverpool at the Emirates. So I trust that we can beat them. I trust that we can go on a nice little run and we can beat them. We get our players back. 3 points is nothing in October, especially. And I know that there's another international break around that time. I don't know if it's before or after. So for me, if you had to ask me, if you gave me the option right now of a 2-0, I'm taking it.
But guys, we can't lose at the Etihad. Like, for me and all the where I'm going to get definitive is we can't lose at the Etihad because, okay, let's say we win the derby and everything's great and wow, mate. If we go and lose at the Etihad, even if it's a 1-0 defeat, then we're 5 behind them, and then there's a defeat on the board, and then there's that mental edge they've got. I think that is where, like, I feel a lot of stress.
But do you know what it is, though, James? I think everybody would be like, all the rivals, they'll be like, oh, you lost, yeah, you can't use excuses of players. But we do have questionably 4 players out with Calafiori, who we know can come in and, make a difference on the left back or left centre back role. Odegaard, who is indefinitely our creator, the only real creator in the team. And then you also have 2 other players in the likes of Declan Rice, who, okay, he's missing the North London derby, but he's not missing the Man City game. That's huge, huge risk. And then Moreno, who, for all intents and purposes, if you think about the type of games that we would need him for, Man City go to the games because he ain't missing a duel. He isn't missing a header. And what do we need him for? These heavy, tough, physical games. Haaland, De Bruyne, the likes of, what's his name? Ruben Diaz, Romero, Van de Ven. So I think he's somebody who can negate set pieces, both offensively and defensively, and obviously the creative play. So for me, I as I said, I know we'll be 5 points behind them, but I don't think that I will be feeling like, oh my God, like I want to, rip someone's neck off. I won't feel like that. I'll be more like, yeah, okay, fine, we lost, but we're missing some really important pieces to the puzzle. That for me, 5 points I can live with.
Yeah. What's it, Sheroy? What's it called in the 5 stages of grief? Is it bargaining, when you start going, well, if we do this, and then actually you realise that you're settling for so much less.
Is it bargaining or bartering? It's one of them, isn't it?
But the whole point is, though, like I can rush. Like again, I'm trying to rationalise and understand that we are missing players. We didn't do what we needed during the transfer window. So now I'm coming to a point that, okay, fine. What's the best that I can do with these little pieces to try and make a pancake? I'm missing certain things, but I can still make a pancake. It's just not.
I know, but here, this is where for me, and this isn't any criticism because I've been doing this too, right? But this goes back to what I was saying earlier. We started talking about Tottenham, but now we're talking about how far behind Manchester City we could be, and what happens if we go to. This is and this is what I mean by they're living in our heads rent free. And this is all because of one title challenge with them where we missed out by 2 points. But there was some expectation because the one before that, no one really expected us to be it. Liverpool had to do this year after year after year and go again and again and again, right? And I know this isn't a boxing podcast, but the reason Anthony Joshua lost to like Andy Ruiz is because he started looking at Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury instead of the guy that was in front of him. The North London derby is happening this weekend. And the reason that I'm not taking a point, forget, notwithstanding what could happen in the title race and who's coming up afterwards, I think we should beat them because I think we are a better team than them, even with the injuries. And that's the metric I use game by game. And that's what I think builds a successful title challenge. You go in there and you don't take anything less than a point before the game if it's a team that you think you ought to beat. And this is one of them. I don't often big up Tottenham content creators. And Lee, this might upset you because I know there's a love-hate relationship with this guy, but go watch Tapping Times' video last night. He sat there. I mean, I think in Mauritius at like 3 a.m. he was recording, saying, He was like, he was sat there saying, I'm looking at a bunch of Spurs players rejoicing at the fact that Ødegaard's injured and Rice is out and Moreno's out. Make no mistake, these boys can still beat us by doing exactly what they did last season because we have the same fragility this season. So when you go and start talking to what I would call slightly more rational Tottenham fans, they're still concerned about what we could do to them in their own backyard, even if we don't play that well, like the first half last year. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. By the way, congratulations to you.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I was just about to say massive congrats. Massive congrats to as I know him personally, and shout out to him. And he's following in his brother's footsteps and making the right decision. So well done. He didn't follow his brother with everything, but so.
Well, actually, that's a really good opportunity. I haven't even told Sheroy this, but Tosin is confirmed for next week's podcast, so he will be joining us after North London derby and looking at Atalanta. So we'll try and secure a second guest as well. But look forward to having, one of the twins joining us. But congrats to look forward to having Tosin joining us. I think as we start to wrap up this pod, we haven't really talked about 11 and tactics. So I'll just sort of weave this in quickly. What people hear me making the point of 2 draws isn't the end of our title race, and they think that's my defeatist mentality of that's what I'd be happy with, and get 2 draws and run out of there. I wouldn't. If offered it to me on a play right now, I wouldn't, because I want to play the games because I think we're good enough and I believe in this team. But I'm just taking the conversation to the level that Arsenal fans have online, which is basically like, well, we've got to now. Well, everything's over if we don't, and the season's done. It's like, well, let's actually unpick that, because we can go winless in the next 2 league games, and I wouldn't believe that it's over. Mm-hmm. Now, if we lose one of them, mainly that Etihad game, then I think things look really, really bleak for us. But like you said, let's take it one at a time. Now, in terms of this game on the weekend, I am so torn, because I've kept saying on pieces of content that there's 2 approaches Arteta can take, which is you go profile for profile, in which case Havertz comes back into midfield, you got Partey in there, so you got physicality, and Waneri does the Ødegaard job. You could go Partey, Jorginho, Waneri for the sake of having your backup 3 midfielders to the other 3 that are injured. Those are the other 3 in the squad. You use them. But I just think that we hurt them on transition, and getting Trossard and Havertz, 1 in midfield, 1 up top. So you still got the 4-4-2 out of possession press, and then either Martinelli or Sterling on the left, Saka on the right, and you just try hit them in transition. I don't know what the answer is, but Arteta's got a little bit he can play with there. I feel like all we did last year was nullify Spurs' spaces that they like to get into, inverting the fullbacks, finding space in behind, and it was ugly. But we basically went, come on then, because you're going to leave us all the room we could possibly want to hurt you. And I have a feeling that if we had our players fully fit, we would take the game more to them punch for punch. We might be forced back into that approach. What do you think, Lee?
I think Havertz has to play, and I think Havertz should play in midfield. Now, everybody's going to say, I remember what he did last season. I just want to say, myself and Talia were part of the Havertz Defence League when everybody was getting onto him and saying he's not good enough. So, some people need to give me some flowers in the chat. Don't kill me too much. And I've kind of been defeated.
No, you're giving him credit. You were.
Listen, I thought that he was playing well last season when everybody was cussing him. So I think if you look at the game that we played against Bayer Leverkusen, now again, I'm contradicting myself because it is pre-season, but he played in midfield and he was very good. If you see this season, some of the balls that he's playing, sliding through, like really, really good. The moment that he had against Brighton, over the top. I know we should have scored, but I also think the thing that preluded that, absolutely fantastic. If that was Haaland, everybody will be frothing at the mouth about him and saying the same thing. Why does he miss so many big chances? That's what Havertz did in that same situation. Yes, I know they're different players in terms of finishing, but that's what Haaland does. He misses big chances. So I think Havertz is a different player to who he was last season. We aren't looking at the same person. And I think we need that bite in midfield with the likes of Basuma. I know he's possibly injured, but Basuma, Bentancur, he's another one that likes to put his foot in. And we know Maddison, again, he's going to be up for the game in the midfield. So I definitely think get the legs around him, get the balls, get that pressure on, and play Jesus up front for 60 minutes. We know we can get that. I think we can get that out of him. I'm sure he can play that amount of minutes. I would start Sterling on the left-hand side, and I would definitely start Saka on the right. And I think, as you said, I think there's a chance for us to kind of really do some damage. As Sheroy said earlier on, they're gonna have a highline. They are not gonna try and reinvent the wheel. They do not play any other way. And I think there's a chance for us to kind of really play both ways, whether it's either keep ball and try and obviously counter and sort of beat the press, or we can counter attack them. There are two different ways to play with those kind of players. So I definitely think Havertz should play up in the midfield. I wouldn't start Ethan. I know I'm sort of saying the same things again, but I just think it's unfair for a 17-year-old to start the game.
I think he'd want to start. Anyway, but that's beside the point. James, when you were in America, what did you ask Arteta when he responded and said, because it was the way that I could change the least personnel in positions or something along those lines? What was the question?
I hate you because this was a clip I was going to play on my preview on Friday.
Shit, sorry.
But I asked him. No, I'm so glad you brought it up. I didn't know. Wavelength. I love it.
No.
The podcast, we're building connections.
Yes, the telepathy, man. But I need to be part of this universe, man. I need to be part of this universe, man.
Absolutely, man. Look, I asked Arteta why White plays right back and Timber's playing centre back when they're both on the pitch together. And yeah, his answer was there's a few things to do with fitness, but the first thing he said was one of the things he said was he doesn't want to split the things that are working and make the fewest changes possible. That was his first.
That's why Havertz starts up front for me, because he started well. Jesus' fitness is a bit of an unknown. That's up top. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So there are two positions that he's going to have to change through suspension injury, and that's Ødegaard and Rice ultimately. And I've sort of got two people in the comments, feel free to slate me. I'm putting myself out here on YouTube so I can expect it. But I've got two combinations here. And in each of them, there is an ever so slight wild card. If he does go with Ethan, then I think you want a bit more of an experienced midfielder behind him, so I would play Jorginho. But if he doesn't do that, and he does put someone like Trossard there, for example, I think you've got the experience there. I actually want to see Timber next to Partey in that midfield. One of the reasons I say that is because if I'm looking at Basuma and Maddison, for example, and I'm looking at maybe Partey and Jorginho, I am concerned about their dynamism in that midfield, the two of them together, particularly if you're sitting there sort of absorbing pressure.
Who would you play left back then, sorry?
I think Calafiori's fit.
Oh, okay, sorry. I
honestly think Calafiori's fit.
Okay, cool. No, sorry. Apologies.
No, that's one of the reasons. I just think what Timber does is he gives you that ability to shield the ball. He's technically quite sound. He's very strong, and he has the legs that Partey may not, in terms of the explosive nature of what Partey used to be. And he's a good ball carrier. So that's one combination. But the other is obviously if he's not concerned about that, put young Ethan in there, and let's just see that fearless, youthful exuberance and that freedom that can come with a young player. Right, I mean those are what I'd like to see personally, and I one of the reasons I say that is because when we bought Timber, everyone was like, "Yeah, but bro, the guy can step into midfield. That's why you really want him. That's why he's a good signing." Well, I mean, if there was ever a bloody time to prove that your squad's diverse enough, it's when you're shafted with numbers. So it's all good us talking about it, and then we shouldn't sort of cower at the thought of it happening when it could actually and should actually happen.
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if Arteta decided to look past Jorginho, but I think if you wanted to be more physical than Tottenham, which we did really well in the last game, then that's the solution. Calafiori left back, Timber in midfield. But there's other ways to be, to use the physicality we've got. Okay, we don't have the intricacy of an Odegaard. One area might not be ready. Marino's not there. He certainly had something from that perspective. But there's even a world in which, Jorginho and Partey sit, and you've got Saka, Sterling, Martinelli behind Havertz. I mean, that's chaos, right? That's just, three runners all waiting to pick them off in some way. It's that an approach. And then Jorginho next to Partey, the two of them a little bit tighter. I'm really glad you picked up that Arteta quote. But do you remember when we won at Newcastle 2-0 St James's Park? And he was asked why he went for Jorginho over Partey, who was on the bench. And we all were saying, midfield, Joe Linton and Emirates, you've got to have.
Yeah.
And what did he say, Arteta? He said, because we weren't gonna beat them physically, so we had to beat them with the ball and mentally, and be better than them, technically. So is that an approach that you basically just say, Jorginho and Partey, you grab them, don't you dare lose the ball? There's approaches. We are not dead and buried here with this injury.
I think Jorginho will play, and I think he has to play because, again, and I feel like when I'm talking, I'm being very defeatist and very down on, and Ethan. I'm not. I love to play. I think he's amazing, but I'm just skeptical about this game off the ball, more so on the ball. Off the ball, the defensive, that close. You know how he loves to always do that on the sideline, the close knit sort of formation.
But that's how you beat Tottenham. That's how you beat Tottenham.
I'm just worried if Ethan can do that to the intensity and high level that we need in a game like this and a game against Man City. So I will play Jorginho because I think he's also somebody who can unpick a lock, and he can do that from a deeper role. We saw that last season as a role in Man City away when Declan actually played the 6 and he played the 8, and Jorginho was the one flying around, and he was like a blue-ass fly. He was going crazy. And I think that...
Liverpool at home, he was unreal in that 8.
Liverpool at home, so apologies. Yeah, so that was also another game.
The argument is that he wouldn't need to unpick a lock, though, Lee, because that door's open with Spurs, generally. And that's why if you're talking about the front three that James just mentioned, Sterling, Martinelli, Saka, in whichever order you want, then Jorginho is the guy, because one thing he finds those runs.
When you think about, I think what Arteta wanted to do, I think originally he wanted Jesus and Havertz to play together, and we saw that again against Bayer Leverkusen. I know it's not much of a measuring stick to say how well it's played, but we saw that great goal that Jesus scored. He went down the middle, smashed it in bottom left-hand corner, I believe it was. I think when you look at those two, they do have a little bit of a tandem. I don't know why, but it does.
Yeah, they do.
And I think that's the reason why. That was why I originally said I would put Havertz in midfield, I would have Partey, and I would have Jorginho next to him. Those balls over the top that Partey can play quite easily. We know that Jorginho can play those. He loves playing those balls to Saka. He loves them over the top, unpick a lot. Against, I think, was it 2 seasons ago against Aston Villa away from home? He was superb that game. And then I think he scored in the last minute.
Martinez own goal.
Yeah, he was so good in that game. So I think, Jorginho is somebody who's underrated, and I don't need him to play every single game. It's one game that he needs to play. Step up, run around, play those excellent balls forward. And as Sheroy said, I think they're there for the taking. I'm not somebody who's high on all of their players. I think we've got enough to beat them. I think I've definitely got a bit more fire in my belly talking to you lads.
That's it, and we're going to round off the podcast. Lee, you've been fantastic, and to anyone watching this, and there'll be some people who feel that fire and they'll say, "Yeah, come on." Mm-hmm. Some will go, "I will be here at full time." When you don't get the result you want and you're feeling disappointed, and look, that's fine. But I'd rather feel all the disappointment then. And while we're entering that run in, and it's the big week and it's the big game, I want to try and, to use an Arteta word again, transmit a bit of energy, because I think this fan base needs it. That we are not without problems. No one is sitting here going, "What's wrong? Everything's great. Life's brilliant. What's everyone complaining about?" we have problems. I did a live show about it with Alex from The Different Knock. Things are not 100 right now at Arsenal. But for me, this isn't the week to dwell on it. And I think we've had a really good therapeutic chat about it. We've offered some solutions. We've looked at all sides. And now it's just full steam ahead. There will be a tactical preview coming out on Friday. If I can put one together, that's the aim. But we're going to look at what we can do from a tactical perspective to hurt Tottenham, where they've been a little bit weak in these opening games. And then there'll be content from all of us at full time on Sunday in some way, shape or form. Lee, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Round of applause.
I appreciate it. As I said, I love watching this show. You know, I watch Sheroy's stuff now that he's putting stuff out finally after you've come back from your little hiatus away with the missus. I'm sure you had a good time. And listen, man, it's a pleasure to be on this show. And listen, Sunday's an important game. I'm sure we can do it. And I'm sure I'll be back on this show very, very soon with some happier times, happier points.
100% we'll do it. Sheroy, everyone knows Sheroy's voice, but it's always a pleasure having your voice on this podcast, man.
Wait, hold on. Do we have any predictions, by the way, before we go?
Go on. I'm going.
Right.
I think we won 1-0.
I just wanted to know what you guys thought.
I said 2-0. I said 2-0 yesterday on my channel because I recorded before the Odegaard injury, and I'm now accounting for that and saying 1-0.
Okay, I said 2-2 on further Arsenal because that was my head, but F it, I'll go with my heart. I'm taking the energy from this pod. 2-1 win.
Come on.
You know what? I always say 2-1, but we never concede away from home. I physically don't understand why we don't. I don't know how we don't, but we never concede away from home. So I'm going to actually go 2-0. I don't know why, but I'm going to go 2-0 to Arsenal, by the way.
It'd be amazing. It'd be amazing. Everyone subscribe to Sheroy's voice and Gooner Lee on YouTube. You guys have been fantastic. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. It's a big week, so a slightly longer pod than usual, but I hope you've all enjoyed it. And we will be back to hash it all out, whatever happens across the weekend, and look at Atalanta early next week. Of course, Arsenal play on the Thursday night, so we'll drop you this podcast a little bit earlier. I think next week we'll figure that all out. And of course, plenty of football to come with the Etihad next week too. It's relentless, but hey ho, we'll be here to talk about it all. Big thanks. Catch you all in a bit. Really hope you've enjoyed another episode of the Goonerverse podcast with Arsenal fans from around the Arsenal world giving their amazing thoughts. A big thanks to our guest today. If you do want to follow this podcast on the go, you can. It's available on podcast platforms as well. Join us next week where we'll get more Arsenal fans to talk all things Arsenal. A big thank you again.